problem, desire, paradise, hell, and a dark abyss. What are these? Our first main scenes as we come to know the story we want to write. After all, we're our first readers. Come along, we're starting the rough shape. Welcome to The Right Focus. We cover productivity, process, craft, and tools. Our podcast episodes last as long as it takes to fix a quick dinner, drive a short commute, or take a brisk walk. All through the summer months, we focus on the craft of writing novels and novellas and epics, from beginning ideas to prepping for publication, week by week by week. For the next 2 weeks, we start our novel, writing scenes around which everything will pivot. These scenes are the plot 7. With the foundational understanding of protagonist and antagonist, we can develop the necessary scenes that are the main points on the arc of story. Plot 7 represents these pivotal scenes. We could continue to play at writing, filling out templates and sketching out ideas here and there. Playing without purpose, however, does not achieve the goal of publication. Our writing goal is begin. For our first section, it's time to write the full-blown introductory scene where the protagonist meets the antagonist. For our first session, we begin. We write all the dialogue. We build our protagonist through thoughts, memories, history. We develop our setting, situation, and the way we want to read our novel. We start by fleshing out last week's sketch that introduced the protagonist and antagonist. We add details as we go. Details of character opinion, himself, herself, other characters of the situation. Write the descriptive details of the setting and its situation. Touch on the strong identifiers only as we describe our primary characters. We also unfold a protagonist realization of the primary conflict, whether by hint or actual event. Depending on the genre and our own wishes, we do not have to point the finger at any specific antagonist. Indeed, misidentification is a time-honored method of adding suspense to any book. The protagonist does not have to be identified in his role as conflict creator at the very beginning. Many novelists do introduce the antagonist as such very early on, often before the protagonist is introduced. Nevertheless, a good mystery rule to follow, whether the genre is mystery or fantasy or science fiction or military thriller, is to introduce the antagonist on the page at some point before the end of the first chapter. We may not need to identify the antagonist as the antagonist. However, the antagonist introduction does hint at being the true conflict creator, neither ally nor a neutral character. Name known or unknown, glee revealed or hidden, the antagonist drives the story forward. That's an important point. For the first part of the novel, the antagonist acts while the protagonist reacts. By the last third, our protagonist should be acting while the antagonist is reacting. This guideline holds unless we're writing literary fiction. Protagonists aren't successful in literary fiction. By the time we finish this first writing session of the week, we may have hints at the antagonist unveiling. Make notes of those hints. We may wish to have the protagonist realization of the conflict unfold over several events of the story. Make notes of how that unfolding will occur. The first step of that realization for the protagonist and the reader needs to occur here in the opening of the book, and the evil performed by the antagonist must be known before the first chapter is completed. Revealing the perpetrator of this evil can be delayed until the novel's very end, or at the ordeal point, some sort of dark abyss. 3 rules for writing this week. 1. Honor the muse. Write a clean draft. Clean drafts do not leave holes in the story. Don't think, I can always revise later. Do think, I will figure this out now. Weeks from now, we may decide to change scenes, increasing suspense, or adding or subtracting characters, or shifting the flow of information. This is perfectly fine to do. Having something written makes the later fixes easier. Second rule, pay the piper. Don't skip the hard parts. We can get stuck. When that happens, write the next sentence and then the next. Truly stuck? Take a brief respite from the computer. As soon as you return, start writing immediately. Ignore the distractions. During that respite, Don't pick up your smartphone. Don't plant yourself in front of the TV. Turn off any internet access on your laptop. Ignore all phone calls. Calls can go to voicemail. Yes, that's perfectly all right to do. Rule number 3, stay healthy. Obey the 30 to 5 or the 45 to 15-minute breaks. For every 30 minutes of writing or 45 minutes, take a 5-minute or 15-minute break. These breaks recharge our creativity. During the break, walk away from all electronics. Move around. The brain is dependent upon circulation. Drink water, purified or spring, without additions that contain sugar. Don't snack. Writing time is not for eating. Eating time is mealtime. 3 math equations that you need to do, they're all about how much to write, which is hard to dictate. Different stories demand different opening scenes. Different writers will always have different word counts. A manuscript generally has 285 words per page. Page estimates are for a standard font at 12 with 1-inch page margins, and the numbers on the page can range anywhere from 250 to 285 to 300. Variations occur if you have a densely descriptive page or a very light writing page with lots of dialogue. The National Novel Writing Month has people write 50,000 words in 30 days. That's an average of 1,666 words per day. Here's our first example. 285 words per page with 1,666 words per day will result in about 6 pages per day. Choose a page count or a word count goal. I record both in my planner. Do likewise until you know what works for you. Once you reach about 150 pages of your manuscript, you can test your own words per page against your words per day. Count about 10 pages on average, random pages, and then divide them up. At that 150 pages in, we can also determine our average pages per scene and our average pages per chapter. We should see a working system developing. Once that personal system develops, we can project how long it may take to write our novel. Example 3. In our early days of writing, more time is needed to achieve the daily goal. The more we write, the more rapidly will come the words that we write. The more we allow the creative muse to flow, turning off the critical editor, the less time we will need to achieve that daily goal. When we hit the rate of about 1,000 words per hour, we're working at the pro writer rate. For session 2 this week, we're looking at a dear desire of the protagonist. William Shakespeare is a master of pacing. Most high school students who slog through his plays will disagree with that statement. However, watch the better films for Hamlet and Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet and King Lear, Much Ado About Nothing, or Midsummer Night's Dream. You are soon caught up in the story. Then watch the film again, following along with the text. You will quickly notice is that Shakespeare spends an inordinate amount of time developing Acts 1 and 2 and 3. Act 4 runs half the length of the preceding act. Act 5 closes very quickly. Acts 1 and 2 are the longest because they have so much to set up. Primary characters and conflict, situation and themes, foreshadowing and setting. All novels are similar to his plays. The opening scenes are much longer than the concluding scenes. In our first session, we introduced an opening event that crystallizes the conflict for the protagonist. We have both primary characters on stage, although the antagonist in that role may still be hidden. Now we're going to twist the knife a little deeper into the protagonist, because readers love angst, and every writer begins as a reader. We need to destroy the dear desire of the protagonist, whether the desire is an actual person or a thing like a job promotion or hiding a destructive secret, or a place as a symbol of the protagonist's family or the embodiment of a dream. We have to destroy it. The threat alone is not enough. This destruction is the only thing that sets the protagonist moving on the hard journey that will transform them. No one wants to change. Only sacrifice will drive us through it. The destruction may be literal or figurative. The antagonist will not be able to resist the destruction of this dear desire, and that irresistibility will reveal the antagonist's evil heart and the protagonist's protective heart. How do we write this scene? Use the interrogatory 7. Who, what, where, when, how, why, and by whose aid. The sacrifice needs to be important to the protagonist and one other person. This increases the need for the protagonist to start the difficult and transformative journey to defeat the antagonist, by whose aid also includes the person assisting the antagonist. We might sacrifice this person at this point, causing the protagonist to believe the conflict is over, or sacrifice them later into the story, only to reveal the person as an assistant or a minion to the real antagonist, an unanticipated and greater evil. Our writing goal for this session is to destroy the dear desire. Sketch out the answers to the interrogatory 7 from who to both sides of the by whose aid. Weave these answers into the writing we did in our first session, setting up the dear desire, then gradually creating it as the focus of the destruction, and finally destroying it. We're not finished, though. We need to present the protagonist first and devastated reaction to its destruction. Destruction of the dear desire here at the opening of the novel does one major thing for the reader. It ratchets up the suspense level. While the reader may consciously think we won't destroy the protagonist, the reader subconsciously will persist in believing that we may destroy him. And here's something for our own subconscious to mull over. This dear desire will be discovered as an illusion. An actual and attainable dear desire will present itself deeper into the story. The protagonist will achieve this dear desire only to have it threatened by the antagonist. And when this second, more powerful dear desire is placed in danger, the reader's suspense level is screwed tighter and tighter. Oh, the thrill of the angst. In session 3, we write our end. The beginning and the dear desire form the first opening stage of the plot 7. Now we focus on the end of our novel. It seems counterproductive to write an end as we start the beginning. Everything we write, though, drives toward the end. As his second of 7 highly effective habits, Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Novel writing is the same way. Once we know the end, we write toward it. Everything we add, all the twists and motifs, all the characters and settings, all the thematic elements and suspenseful clues, everything works toward that end. The end is not the ultimate face-off between the protagonist and the antagonist. It is the ultimate unspoken goal of the protagonist. Harry Potter's greatest desire was to belong. At the end of the series, he belongs to an elite group that keeps all wizards safe. He is surrounded by his friends and his family. He successfully launches his son into a world which he knows his son will love, and into which he also knows his son will remain safe. Our writing goal is the paradise of the end. Here are the basic questions we need to answer. Sketch your ideas quickly, then write the scene. What kind of ending do we want? Tragic, happy, melancholic, thrilling? What impression will our readers have when they close the book? How do we want the protagonist to end up? In what physical, intellectual, and emotional state? How does the protagonist react when they have the new dear desire in their hands? How will the reader know that the protagonist has triumphed over evil? Even in a series, the protagonist has to triumph at the end of each novel. Why does a reader keep reading? Because a well-liked protagonist has won once and will need to win again. This ending will most likely change more than any other of these 7 foundational scenes. Endings, though, begin at the beginning. Often, writers will return the ending to a pivotal early setting. In the overall series, J.K. Rowling returned Harry to the station where everyone boards the train for Hogwarts. This time-honored method bookends or frames the novel, creating a sense of completion. Readers want to close the book with a good feeling. Professional writers often say that the opening sentence sells the first book. The ending sells the next book. Satisfy the reader and sell the next book. Finally, be aware. Endings will very likely present to the world what is most important in our life. We writers bleed our hopes and dreams and fears and hates onto the page. Critiques that analyze a writer's body of work often discover the person behind the stories, and that's okay. For session 4, we look at the stress point. This is plot 3 of the 7. We're jumping around, building strong scenes. When we finish the entire plot 7, we will have the skeleton of our novel intact. We still need to add the organs and circulatory system and flesh that makes it a complete body of work. When we consider the final result, this skeleton should give us delight. What event will put the protagonist in extreme stress? All 3 elements of the individual must come into play in this scene. Physical stress is easy to write. Intellectual stress, not so much. How do we write intellectual stress? We place a dilemma before the protagonist. A dilemma, as we discussed in session 1, is a choice between two bad alternatives, a choice between evils. Intellectual stress would place the protagonist in a situation similar to one that the antagonist has created. We may wish to mimic the opening evil, and the protagonist discovers the choices will result in the same destruction that the antagonist wrought. We return to ideas originally developed in week 1. Often, these early ideas only need a little sharpening to become the sticky point on which everything will pivot. Emotional stress is the third element that we writers must wring out of the protagonist. When the intellectual dilemma is tied to emotional stressors, we have achieved a strong angst. Our writing goal: stressors for the stress point. What will be the protagonist's emotions during this stress point? When they know the antagonist is gloating, how will they react? How will they recover from the stress point? How will the protagonist's reactions be diametrically up to the antagonist's reactions in the same situation? Here's another opportunity to wrap the novel inside itself. The end wrapped to the beginning. This scene should wrap from the three-quarters point to the ultimate battle. These chain links bind up the reader's satisfaction level. Enrich this scene with the protagonist's emotions, adding enough to contrast them with the physical evidence of the antagonist's emotions when we're writing the climax. Our final session for the week is the Nadir. The Nadir is the lowest point of the celestial sphere, according to astronomy. In writing, the high point of the story is not the climax, it's the zenith, the point at which the protagonist feels the greatest power, emotional soaring, intellectual success, and our physical prowess. The nadir is the opposite of each of those. It is the lowest and most unsuccessful point in a story. In the archetypal story pattern, this is the ordeal. Other story structures call this the dark moment. It is the cave from which no return seems possible. The protagonist is so deep into the cave that no light from above penetrates and nothing gives guidance for any exit. Our writing goal then is to create a really dark nadir. What event will place the protagonist into the nadir? As we did with a stress point, develop the physical, intellectual, and emotional sides of the protagonist. Track each through the fall into the nadir, the wallowing in the misery of it, and then the climb from it as the protagonist discovers the solution to escaping and defeating the antagonist. This is the antagonist's greatest triumphal moment. The triumph the antagonist feels should contrast starkly with the protagonist's emotions. The antagonist has prevented the protagonist from achieving the new dear desire. How does the antagonist react? Before we go any further, we need to make notes of how this solution can be foreshadowed or developed. Magical skills do not automatically appear. Physical skills must be developed. Intellectual creativity breaks the walls of hidebound tradition first. We must decide how we plant these developing skills. How can we foreshadow the solution? And remember, foreshadowing remains in the shadows. The official definition says hints and clues of what is to come. Hints and clues are only seen by people in hindsight as they look back. We will need to slide these clues in as stage whispers, stronger than actual whispers, but unheard by the other characters and the readers. Evil chuckles may occur as we write this nadir. Tears may result. Beg forgiveness of your characters and give your muse time off for cleansing and recharging. Before we leave this week, we will have accumulated several structural notes. We have noted down how the antagonist will be unveiled throughout the entire book, several different places. If the protagonist misidentified the antagonist, we have notes about where the misidentification itself will be unveiled. We also made notes about the protagonist's understanding of the unfolding conflict. We have ideas about the first dear desire becoming illusory. These notes will help exhibit the true dear desire being recognized by the protagonist. We picked up a few ideas about elements that create the idyllic world restored to the protagonist. We need to create at least 3 points for at least 2 of the strongest. Also, we need to pull notes about the protagonist's necessary development of skills that will lead to the solution. Keep the skills essential to, but not predictive of the solution. Discard the first couple of ideas, go with the third, fourth, fifth, and following ones. Now, with all these notes gathered up, put them into some kind of order. This week is like skeletal bones scattered around. We can lay them in an order, but they lack necessary connections. And we still have next week, which will finish out the plot 7. So we have more bones that are going to be coming. In looking back at the novel we've started, are you happy with your production? Does the project still seem overwhelming? Are you seeing the pieces coming together so that you have an idea of the jigsawed novel? With half the skeleton in place, are more ideas flowing, giving us opportunities for delicious and malicious chuckles, as well as heart-filled joy? Judge as a writer. As I noted earlier, I'm visual. I tack everything to a large arced board at this point. Finished scenes go at their appropriate places. Tacked notes give me reminders when I'm ready to tackle those scenes. I can stand back and see the story come together. If you're working on computer, you can create an outline chart, but it's not the same as a physical chart. Software for writing, such as Scrivener, is supposed to provide a tack board that helps you see what's to come. Since I turn off my computer every day, and sometimes don't turn it on, I don't see those things. The tack board keeps me focused on my goal. How many words have you written? How many pages? What will keep you focused on the long-term goal? That focus is all that really matters. Inspiration for this week comes from Margaret Atwood. The thing about writers that people don't realize is that a lot of what they do is play. Playing around with. That doesn't mean that it isn't serious, or that it doesn't have a serious meaning, or a serious intention. Thanks for listening to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by M.A. Lee with the assistance of Remy Black and Edie Runes from Writers Inc. Books. All through the summer months, our focus is the craft of writing. We are discovering your novel from beginning idea to prepping for publication. We'll work through the process stages of foundations to story, envisioning the story, analyzing story before, during, and after the draft, harvesting the story through revisions and enhancements, and prepping the story for publication. Many of these preps and guides are useful setups for the National Novel Writing Month in November. That's writing only, no idea work. We can also use this information to solve issues with stories that we've abandoned. All those stories are crying in the wilderness. Time to rescue them with the right focus. Show notes for this and other episodes can be found at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com. Remember, whatever occurs, write on. Problem, desire, paradise, hell, and a dark abyss. What are these? Our first main scenes as we come to know the story we want to write. After all, we're our first readers. Come along, we're starting the rough shape.